Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 4, Text 9. Do all your students, they know this verse already or not? So apart from learning chapters, they've already learned some important verses, is it? Yeah, one of the more quoted verses of Bhagavad-gita, well-known verse. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Purport. The Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the 6th verse. One who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain a liberation only after much trouble and many, many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the Lord has many, many forms and incarnations. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers, as stated in the Vedas, Purusha Bodhini Upanishad. What's the other name of that Upanishad? Is that the Radha Upanishad? There's another name. That's Radha Upanishad, it's sometimes called. Eko Deva Nitya Lila Anurakto Bhakta Vyapi Hridyantaratma. The one Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally engaged in many, many transcendental forms and relationships with his unalloyed devotees. This Vedic version is confirmed in this verse of the Gita personally by the Lord. He who accepts this truth on the strength of the authority of the Vedas and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and who does not waste time in philosophical speculations, attains the highest perfectional stage of liberation. Simply by accepting the truth on faith, one can without a doubt attain liberation. The Vedic version, Tattvam Asi, is actually applied in this case. Anyone who understands Lord Krsna to be the Supreme, or who says unto the Lord, "You are the same Supreme Brahman, the Personality of Godhead," is certainly liberated instantly, and consequently his entrance into the transcendental association of the Lord is guaranteed. In other words, such a faithful devotee of the Lord attains perfection, and this is confirmed by the following Vedic assertion. Tam eva vidit vati mrityumeti nanya panta vidyate yanaya. one can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there is no other way to achieve this perfection. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.8. A well-known quote from those who are scholars of the Upanishads. That there is no alternative means that anyone who does not understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is surely in the mode of ignorance, and consequently he will not attain salvation simply, so to speak, by licking the outer surface of the bottle of honey, or by interpreting the Bhagavad-gita according to mundane scholarship. Such empiric philosophers may assume very important roles in the material world, but they are not necessarily eligible for liberation. Such puffed up mundane scholars have to wait for the causeless mercy of the devotee of the Lord. One should therefore cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and knowledge, and in this way attain perfection. Again, I'm speaking on the Bhagavad-gita, although it's the standard to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam at this time. Recently in Vrindavan, I was talking with my godbrother, Mukunda Datta Prabhu, who's one of the most learned devotees in our movement, and he, in the course of conversation, said that, speaking about Gopi Paranadana Prabhu, who was the best known and maybe the best scholar in our movement until his recent passing away. So Mukunda Datta Prabhu said about him that he emphasized on the Srimad Bhagavatam so much that it was almost to the exclusion of Bhagavad-gita. But Mukunda Datta Prabhu said that as far as I'm concerned, I'm finding the Gita, there's so much there that I find it difficult even to get up to the Bhagavatam. So I'm feeling in a similar way. Of course, that's also stated. Gita su Gita kartavyam kimanyai shastra vistarai yasvayam padmanabhasya mukha padmad vinisritam. In one of the Gita Mahatmyas, it's stated that one should carefully recite Bhagavad-gita. What need is there for studying any other Shastra in detail? It is directly spoken by Krishna himself. And again, that's Eko Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam. There should be one Shastra. The Gita, which is the song sung by the son of Devaki, Krishna. But then we find the Janma, the Karma Chamedevyam Evangyo Veti Tatvataha. Who knows about Krishna, his appearance and his activities according to Tattvagyan, then Tyaktva Dehang Punarjanma Naiti Mameti Sojuna. He doesn't take birth again. He comes to me, Krishna says. But to understand this tattva of Krishna can be understood from the Bhagavad-gita, but to go in more detail, one has to go to Srimad Bhagavatam. And then to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, one has to come to Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, when it's stated that Gita is enough, that's true in one sense, but at the same time, there's been no acharya. In other words, all the truths of Krishna are there, but at the same time, no acharya has only discussed Gita. They've all discussed other shastras also. Because what is stated in Gita is stated from other perspectives in other shastras, And the very topic, Jamma Karma, that means, when we talk about Krishna Karma, that means Krishna Leela, and that is described in Bhagavatam. So this is the promise that one who understands Krishna says that his appearance and activities are all divya, not impelled by material energy. One who understands this goes to Krishna. Yesterday, Chitta Hari Prabhu told me about someone we both know who's very intelligent and who studies many shastras and is very learned. And will he go to Krishna or not? Well, from what I've understood from hearing from Srila Prabhupada, the attitude that he had, even though he says Siddhanta and he studied so many, you can get so many books, this, that and the other, you can read. But the attitude he has that, yes, well, I know so much and these others, they don't know so very well. Plus the fact that he's not known to do any devotional service beyond reading and talking as if he knows a lot. Missed the point somewhere. Missing the point. That wasn't who we were also discussing about someone else who's very learned and knows he's very learned. When I say very learned, it's whoever thinks they're very learned is a fool. Because the ocean of knowledge is vast. You remember, compared to one person compared to someone else might be very learned, but we can only, just like even for instance, if you became an expert in the Bhagavatam, according to Gauriya commentaries and maybe other commentaries also, and also Shat Shandarbha, but still there's the whole field there's Madhva Siddhanta and Ramanuja Siddhanta. Then there's so many things, and then there's the whole field of Bengali Gauriya literature, and then Brajbuli literature, and so many things. Oriya, it's the whole field of Oriya. Vaishnavism is hardly studied by anyone. What to speak of Telugu, Tamil, there's just so much. It's just so much. So the history, the development of the sampradaya, and so many things. So to understand Krishna in truth, Krishna himself says how that is possible. Bhaktya mam abhijanati. Krishna can be understood by bhakti. And then again, what is that bhakti? Studying Gita is enough, but then if studying means studying under the guidance of students who have been mature students, who is the student becomes the guru, then his disciple, real disciple, can become guru, always thinking himself a student. So what is that bhakti? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Itipung Sarpita Vishnu Bhaktis, Bhaktihi, Bhaktis Chainavalakshana. So this is the 9 activities, or some are activities and some are attitudinal. They refer to an attitude. Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, they refer to an attitude. So, Krishna can be understood through bhakti. What is bhakti? That is defined in the beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. This famous Anyabhilashita Shunyam verse, and also quoting the Savai Pung Sang Paro Dharmo, and there are various verses like this. It's defined differently in different sampradayas, their definition of bhakti. And there may be several or many definitions, which are, it doesn't mean that one of them is right and the other ones are wrong, but it's bhakti itself is such a vast topic. Well, Krishna can be understood through bhakti, but here it states that one can, by understanding Krishna, one can go to Krishna. But that's understood that one cannot understand Krishna simply by becoming learned. If we think, well, I'll do my Bhakti Shastri course, and then I'll do my Bhakti Vaibhav, then Bhakti Vedanta, and then Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Sarvabhauma means emperor. Then I'll become an emperor, and then I'll charge into the spiritual world. There's no such thing. At the end of all of that, if we can understand that I'm completely insignificant, Turnadapi Sunicha, then we may go to the spiritual world. Bhakti is independent. So when she's not, here's my Bhakti Shastri certificate and let me in to the spiritual world. But it doesn't work like that. Bhakti is, she can give herself to someone or withhold herself. That's another big topic. Bhakti is independent. Nevertheless, Krishna says here he can be this understanding of him leads to him. So understanding him is important. The attitude is ultimate in bhakti. The feeling that I am the servant of Krishna. I'm meant, or even beyond that. There's someone may think Krishna is my son. That is that if one's actually situated in that mood, then that is more exalted than thinking I am a servant of Krishna. Although the attitude of dasya, of service to Krishna, is inherent in all devotees, either very much manifest or less so. But knowing Krishna is important. There is a quote from Srila Prabhupada, don't try to know Krishna, just try to love Krishna. But that, everything has to be understood contextually. So, we should try to know Krishna as he says to understand him. And really knowing him is to love him. He's not some exhibit in a museum for someone to make a study of and get a PhD. Who is Krishna? The answer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then above, Swayam Bhagavan Krishna Ekaleshwar. Who is Krishna? He is the original personality of Godhead, the one and only controller. Then Advitiya, there's no one comparable to him. Nanda Atmaja, he's also the son of Nanda Maharaj, Rasika Shekhar. Swayam Bhagavan Krishna Ekalesha Aditya Nanda Atmaja Rasika Shekhar. He is the son of Nanda Maharaj, and he is the best of relishers of rasa. He's the best connoisseur of loving relations and the taste that arises from that. So Krishna is to be understood through bhakti. One should, in bhakti, one should not neglect understanding who is Krishna. One should not neglect bhakti siddhanta, bhakti vedanta. Siddhanta bolya chittena karaha alash, Eha hoite Krishna lage sudara manos. Do not be lazy in trying to understand the philosophical conclusions about Krishna, for by doing so, by applying one's mind in this way, to try to understand, one's mind will become fixed in Krishna, very strongly fixed in Krishna. So one should try to understand. And there is a stage of bhakti beyond understanding, where there is love without, not that there's misunderstanding, but the devotees who are on the platform, ragatmika bhakti, their bhakti is fully impelled by spiritual loving attachment. They don't have misconceptions like thinking that Krishna is he is a manifestation of the ultimate impersonal oneness. They don't have misconceptions like that. They don't have offensive misunderstanding. But they conceive of Krishna as simply their lover, or their son, or their friend. Most people, when Krishna was personally present, didn't understand that he was supreme. Duryodhana would never accept. Even if people say, show me God, as if to say, okay, show me God and I'll believe. But Krishna showed himself to Duryodhana so many times. He showed the universal form, and still Duryodhana wouldn't believe. Sometimes devotees say, it's very common. They come and say, well, what do we say to these Christians or this and that? There's nothing you can say. If anyone's a fanatic, then they don't even listen. You can say everything which is reasonable, but they don't even hear. They're just waiting. They're just thinking of the next thing they're going to say when you stop speaking. What their mind is closed. Of course, an expert preacher can make some chinks to set the door ajar and put something in their thoughts, or at least to put some doubts in their minds that their blind faith is indeed blind and possibly not correct, although they're convinced it's correct. Yo yang tanung bhakta shraddhaya chitamicchati. Tasya achalang shraddham tameva vidadhamyaham. Krishna says, those who want to worship different gods or wherever they want to put their faith, Krishna makes that faith strong. Krishna is within the heart. So if people want to believe any nonsense, it's Krishna who helps to make that faith strong. Doesn't mean that it's auspicious for them, but when they're determined to be an illusion, Krishna doesn't interfere with that. There's a quote that I'm sending that out this morning. If someone denies Krishna's mercy, then Krishna cannot help them, because he doesn't override the bestowal of minute independence to the jiva. So, all right. You don't want me? All right, okay. I tried. So this understanding Krishna in truth, what is to be understood? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Lord of all. I am His servant. I should serve Him with full faith that if I do so, then Shraddha Shabde Vishas Kahe Surya Nishchoy Krishna Bhakti Koile Sharva Kama Krita Hoy. With full faith that if I simply serve Krishna, then I don't have to do anything else. Everything's taken care of. It's not that I have to serve Krishna and I also have to do some karma and jnana and yoga. Everything is taken. I don't have to go to this demigod, that demigod. Everything is complete and perfect by serving Krishna. So that is the faith by which one is blessed to understand Krishna's activities and pastimes. But there may be many, if we get into studying and the nature of existence, is that from our perspective, as infinitesimal jivas, it seems to be extremely complex, and there seem to be so many things which are difficult to understand. There seem to be so many contradictions. That's from our perspective. Sometimes I used to wonder that why did God make everything so complex? You see, scientists are studying with all these complex molecules and how they interact and the functions of the brain. And I thought, well, from Krishna's perspective, it's not. It's just from my perspective, because I'm just an average idiot. And, from Krishna's perspective, we can't imagine his intelligence. It's beyond our ability to understand. So there may be so many factors. And the other day I got an email, it was sent to myself and several others, with the question, what language does Krishna speak? And then a very nice comment came that, of course, he speaks the language of love. That's play on words, which probably comes in most languages. Maybe not in the demons' language, because they know the language of hate. They think that's very good. But what language does he actually speak? And then one of the receivers to that Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, he said that he wrote which I also just presumed, that Krishna in Vrindavan speaks the language of Vrindavan. He wrote Brij Bhasha, and outside he speaks Sanskrit. So that was my understanding. Of course, we have Brij Bhasha today also, up to the present day in the Vrindavan area. People speak Brij Bhasha, but it wouldn't be the same Brij Bhasha that was spoken 5,000 years ago, because languages change in course of time. Whoops, wait a minute, what's going on here? What language did Krishna speak? He spoke Sanskrit. Okay, that's supposed to be a fixed language according to what we understand. Now, there come questions of anthropology and linguistics. It's not such a simple question if you start thinking about it. Because according to Darwinian evolutionary theory, which is the lens through which almost everything in official orthodox academia is studied, well, there were some microbes, and they gradually became fish, and then they became lizards, and then they became monkeys with a few steps in between, and then they became Charles Darwin. And here we all are today. So that means that language developed at some point. Some primordial being was and then they all said for fire, and then that became the word for fire. I don't know exactly the theory, I'm just giving you some basic education in evolutionary theory. Yeah. And then all kinds of, it became more sophisticated, and then there came the prototype Indo-European language. No one knows what it is, but it must be there, right? Because anthropic principle, it must be there. We don't really know how or why. We don't have any evidence of it except by linguistic theory. There must have been a language that predated all the languages that we have today, especially the Indo-European languages. So we say that the mother of all languages is Sanskrit, but they say, well, that must have come from, there must have been some original language, and out of that came Sanskrit and Bulgarian and Celtic and all these different, like all the people in Europe and India speak. And actually, it is observable by studying Indian literature or English literature or that the language does change in course of time. So if we say, from our perspective, just throw out the anthropologists for a second. We'll bring them back in a second. Krishna speaks Sanskrit, okay, all right. But in Vrindavan, he doesn't speak Sanskrit, because Sanskrit, that's not a language for village people. The whole fact of Vraja Leela, the whole ethos of Vraja Leela is that it's village culture. And in village culture, people are very simple. Sanskrit is a very sophisticated language, which lends itself to formality. Just like in, I don't know Tamil, but I can imagine that the Brahmin Tamil, being very different from the street Tamil, it's much more formal, sophisticated, a medium for, of course, medium of communication, which is more suitable for discussing philosophy and aesthetics, rasa, and dance, drama, all this kind of thing. Whereas the street language is good for political rallies and domestic quarrels and talking with the rickshaw driver and things like that. So Sanskrit is a very formal language, very sophisticated. The whole structure of the language is very sophisticated. Although it's not necessarily that everyone who speaks Sanskrit is a very sophisticated person. But generally it would be considered like that. Just like your Slavic languages are very sophisticated compared in the grammatical structure compared to English. But it doesn't mean that everyone who speaks Croatian, for instance, or Slovak is a very sophisticated, intellectual kind of person. I'm sure they have their expletives and their slang and all kinds of bad words and words that you wouldn't say in the presence of your grandmother and things like that. But Sanskrit is, it's generally spoken, even today, spoken among Brahmins, at least, in the present generation, or even there are young men even today who speak Sanskrit. In Udupi once I was at this shrine of Madhva where he left the world, speaking on Aitareya Upanishad, and one Madhva Brahmin comes and he's talking to his son who's about 5 years old, talking to him in Sanskrit, so he wants him to learn Sanskrit. By speaking he learns it. So, but it'd be Madhva Brahmins and people who are interested in, particularly in Shastra, in the present time. The people who speak Sanskrit nowadays are mostly people who are interested in Shastra. So, but there are colloquial languages also, and most of the Indian languages are derived from Sanskrit. They're easily spoken forms of Sanskrit. There's some disagreement about that in Tamil. They say that came from Lord Shiva, said to have come from Shiva, Agastya, and all this. But definitely the influence of Sanskrit is there very much in Tamil also. So if there's high Hindi, what they call Shuddha Hindi, or Sadhu Bhasha, Bengali, then it's almost like Sanskrit. If you read Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's writings, it's like Sanskrit written in with Bengali grammar. It's a simple grammar, but the words and obviously the concepts that come with them are from Sanskrit. So it's well accepted by pretty much everyone in the academic world, and I don't think there's any argument about that from the Vaishnava side or the Vedic scholarly side. That in India there were languages which were called Prakrita, which means languages derived from Sanskrit. And even the present day Indian languages like Hindi, Bengali, they could fall under that Prakrit, derived. Of course, some scholars say that Sanskrit was derived from Prakrit because, according to their theory, that which is more sophisticated comes later. And they all anyway came from prototype Indo-European language, which is some complete fabrication of someone's mind. So, we see these languages change. Just like we have, what language did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speak? Well, he spoke Sanskrit, as all Brahmins do. He was taught and studied and taught Sanskrit, and he traveled all over India. How did people do that? How did they manage with all the different languages? Sanskrit was the link language, especially among the higher class of people, Brahmins and Kshatriyas. But he spoke Bengali, that's clear. That he did speak. Not everything that we have in Chaitanya Charitamrita that's written in Bengali that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, it probably wasn't originally spoken in Bengali, like Jare Dekho Tare Kaha Krishna Upadesh. He spoke that in Kurmakshetra, which is now part of Andhra Pradesh. So I doubt if the Brahmana there understood Bengali. So it's... And even exactly the verses that we have in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's unlikely that all of them, or even if many of them, were exactly the words that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used, because many of the verses, they begin with Prabhu Kahe. Prabhu Kahe Kahelam E Maha Mantra. Iha Japa Giya Shabe Kare Nibbana. That's actually from Chaitanya Bhagavat. So, if you think that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking in verse, well, in that case he would have said, Kahelam E Maha Mantra Iha Japa Giya Shabe Kare Nibbana. It's unbalanced, because the word Prabhu Kahe, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, comes at the beginning. And maybe Bhagavad-gita also, Krishna says that Imang vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam vivasvan nanave praho manorikshvakave bhavit. Evang parampara praptam imang raja ashayo viduhu sakale neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. Sa evayang mayateja yoga prokta puratanaha. Bhaktosime sakacheti rahasyam he tadutamam. Krishna said, I spoke this knowledge to the sun god, Vivasvan, who spoke it to Manu, who spoke to Ikshvaku. In this way it came down in the guru-disciple succession of and the saintly kings understood it in this way, but due to the mighty force of time, it has become corrupted. So I'm speaking this same knowledge to you today, because you are my devotee and my friend. But some of the verses might have been exactly the same, but some of them definitely weren't. Just like, for instance, this verse which we said today, Janma karma chame divyam evang yoveti tatvata tyaktva dehang punar janma naiti mahameti. So what's the last word? Arjuna. He's not going to say that to Vivasvan. So, and if you Naiti Mam Eti Saha Surya, maybe he could just change it like that. But it wouldn't be exactly the same. There are many verses, and the whole context of him speaking it to Arjuna, and Arjuna's doesn't want to fight and Krishna trying to convince him to fight. That wasn't the context, almost certainly wasn't the context when Krishna spoke to Vivasvana. So he spoke the same knowledge, but the whole structure of how Krishna spoke, first of all, he taught the difference between the soul is eternal, and then the Vedavada Rata, the persons who are interested in elevation to heavenly planets, they're all stupid. And how the Gita unfolded in a certain way to Arjuna, the same topics would have been discussed, but maybe in a completely different order, and to Vivasvana. Because Krishna was specifically addressing Arjuna's misconceptions, and his initial inability to grasp the topic meant that Krishna respoke some of the topics again. So anyway, just like this whole discussion here, Janma Karma Chameda came up because Arjuna, he couldn't work out how that Saivayang Mayate. Then Arjuna interrupts and says, wait a minute, how do you speak to Vivasvana? A bit difficult to understand. Could you explain that? And then Krishna explains about himself. So that question wouldn't have come up. Obviously. So then we have this question then that the language. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke Bengali in Bengal, and he would have spoken Sanskrit among the Pandits and the Brahmanas, but he would have spoken Bengali also. When he came from East Bengal, he mimicked the talking of the accent of the people in East Bengal, and he especially used to, when he was in Navadvip, he used to mimic the pronunciation of people from Shilet area, Sriharta, and they would all say, "Well, you're from there. Your parents are from there also." He grew up with a different pronunciation to that of his parents, because they were from Sriharta and he grew up in Navadvip. So he spoke Bengali, but the Bengali of Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavad is different from that of modern Bengali. And even the Bengali of Chaitanya Charitamrita is somewhat different from that of Chaitanya Bhagavad. It's written by two different persons. And we find in that Bengali, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find bits of what nowadays would be considered Hindi, there's Urdu, and of course Sanskrit. And the whole, a lot of the grammar is very different to modern Bengali. If you spoke that nowadays, people wouldn't understand. Just like the Krishnare, they have that form, whereas in modern Bengali it would be Krishna K, to Krishna. So it wouldn't be understood. So we say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke Bengali, right? And so it must be a spiritual language, and that's spoken in the spiritual world. I was discussing this with Gopi Parandan, and he said that, well, my understanding is in the spiritual world, in Navadvip, Navadvip in the spiritual world, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he lives there and he speaks Bengali. But which Bengali? Bengali is a language which developed some few hundreds of years ago, and it's going on changing all the time. And modern Bengali, like all Indian languages, is interspersed with many English words. So when you say Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks Bengali, what does that mean? It's a language which developed at a certain point in time, and it has various dialects, as do all widespread languages. And there is what's come to be known as Standard Bengali. But that's also something recent, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Bengali of Chaitanya Charitamrita is not standard Bengali, what is nowadays called standard Bengali. So, if Krishna's Leela, we're coming back here to Janma Karma Chame Devyam, Krishna's pastimes are transcendental, beyond the influence of this world, then if Krishna is speaking some Prakrita language in Vrindavan, what is that? It's some language which evolved because people are not smart enough to speak Sanskrit, so they're not educated, so they speak some local language. Whatever language that was wouldn't be the language. We say Brij Bhasha is now there in Vrindavan, but that wouldn't be the language that Krishna spoke, because the language is always changing. So what is Krishna's eternal language? Okay, Sanskrit. What does he speak in Vrindavan? What does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speak in Bengali? Speaks Bengali. Which Bengali? The Bengali at that time was mixed with there was some admixture of Persian, what would now be called Urdu. We can find some words there. When in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks with the Pathan Vaishnavas, he refers to the Kitab, which is a modern Hindi word for book, which is Urdu, and that comes from either Arabic or Persian. Urdu means Arabic and Persian. Vocabulary on a template of Hindi grammar. So, what does that mean? Does that mean you go to the spiritual world and there'll be Urdu there? I don't think your Hindu purists would like that. I mean, sometimes people criticize if you. It's happened to me that you speak some words, speaking Hindi, and you use some Urdu words, and people will criticize. Oh, you're sadhu. You're not supposed to use those words. You're supposed to speak the Sanskrit version only, Shuddha Hindi. So, if everything's derived from Sanskrit, then what's all this? In the pastimes in the material world are supposed to be a replica of the spiritual world. So, what language does Krishna speak? Is it some language that's evolved? And then how does that mean? If it's an evolved and evolving language, then how is that supposed to be something spiritual? Does that disprove Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evang Divyam? It's not transcendental. Or maybe you say his Janma and his Karma is Divya, but his language is mixed up. So then there may be a simple acceptance. Yes, Krishna is transcendental, he's beyond the modes of material nature, but everything he does, he comes to this world, but he's transcendental to it. But then these kind of questions may arise, and how do we understand them? Then we have to think, what is the nature of Leela? Leela in this world, Krishna's pastimes are fully transcendental, but within this world, Krishna's pastimes, there is some interface with the world all around. And therefore, to people who have no faith in Krishna, Krishna appears to be why does Krishna appear to be an ordinary person? Well, in most respects, in many respects, he appeared to be an ordinary person. And that's the beauty and the sweetness and the charm of his Leela, that he appears to be ordinary. If he was all the time just walking around with a 200 feet tall form and zapping the demons just by looking at them and sending people back to Godhead en masse, just looking at them, and then they all have their ascension into the spiritual world. If he showed his godly opulence in such a manifest way, there wouldn't be any sweetness left. And that is the particular sweetness of Vrindavan Leela, is that Krishna's pastimes are very human-like. And even his pastimes outside Vrindavan, they're in many ways human-like. And therefore, Krishna is accused of running away out of fear from quitting Mathura and going to Dwarka out of fear of Jarasandha. So, Krishna's pastimes may appear to be human, and in this way they are confusing. What is that Kunti says? Virambanam. What is that verse? Bhagavan Shikir Shitam Tave Hamanasya. We're all stupid. Not only me. So she says your pastimes are human-like and therefore bewildering. You can look up that word, Tave Hamanasya. Then you'll get it. Or Vidambanam. You can look up. So, Krishna is the Supreme Lord, but when he's in this world, he in some ways appears to be a human. And that discussion came up yesterday also, that was it yesterday or the day before? That devotees, it came up yesterday, that if we just want to do bhakti and then we don't need to do anything else. We can just chant Hare Krishna. We don't need, in this climate, you don't even need clothes, or even if it is cold, you don't need clothes because anyway we're not the body, and let's just chant Hare Krishna. And we don't need to do anything else. But we have to live in this world. And we want to preach Krishna consciousness, so we may have things like palatial temples which are apparently against the principles of spiritual life, just so that we can interact with people. And otherwise we can't interact. If the Shastra says that evang vrata sapriyanamaka, that unmadavan, like a madman. But if we're all like madmen, how are we going to preach? One has to be able to assess. There's the prema maitri kripopeksha. The devotees, they have to preach to the devotees also, and to the innocent, and they will avoid the envious. So there has to be some discrimination and some interaction. So Krishna also. Did you find that verse? No, what's the first line? Naveda kaschid bhagavan chikir shitam tave hamanasya nirnang virambanam. That's the point. That's the point in the first two lines. What's the next two lines? Your pastimes are human-like and therefore confusing or misleading. Yeah, all right. But that point that's in the first two lines there. So Krishna, his pastimes are human-like, and therefore, for the non-devotees, they will be confused. And for the devotees, they will be charmed by Krishna's pastimes. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he appears in this world and he interacts with it as it is at that time. And the situation, on one hand, we understand, of course you can't speak this to mundane anthropologists. It's a completely different perspective on reality. But from our perspective, Maya Devi, who is a servant of the Supreme Lord, she orchestrates the situation in conjunction with Yogamaya to make a situation which is suitable for the Lord to appear, to perform his duty of uplifting the fallen. It's not just some pantomime. People are actually fallen, and Chaitanya. So fallen means they're in Maya. So people are actually fallen. They're under the influence of Krishna's external energy. And Krishna appears in that situation. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears in that situation. and he interacts with the external energy, but he's not touched by it. But he does act to a large extent in accord, while reforming the whole situation, to a large extent he acts in accord with it. He doesn't insist that everyone has to be completely pure and in line with it. To a large extent, the culture is there, suitable for his appearance. He causes devotees to appear before him, and they all live according to the culture of the spiritual world. There is an argument that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he just dressed in the dress that everyone else dressed in, and we can do the same. So if we see people walking around, women walking around with shorts, and that's the norm, then we should also do that, because we should just dress. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dressed the same way that everyone else around him did, so we should do the same thing. But we understand that Navadvip Dham is the eternal abode of the Lord, and that by the arrangement of Yoga Maya, the culture suitable for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance was going on there. Not everyone was following that, but that was the basic culture, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he appeared in a family of Brahmanas who are still following their culture rigidly. He appeared among Vaishnavas, so we can understand that he manifested the culture of the spiritual world, not that just there happened to be some culture there, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just went along with it. We can understand that the culture in what we can call the traditional culture of India, although it is multifaceted, it is basically the culture of the spiritual world, because we see the same descriptions in Krishna Lila as day-to-day life in India over hundreds of years, except in the last 30 years the fall down of India's culture has been at an alarmingly accelerated rate. Otherwise it's the same culture. If we don't accept that, then we have to think that Krishna is just the whole idea of Krishna Lila is just some kind of anthropomorphism. That people living in India, they imagine that God is like this, and they say the spiritual world is like that, and they, just like this, who is that? C.S. Lewis? C.S. Lewis wrote this book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and this whole series of Narnia stories, which ends up with the lion actually being Jesus, and then all the good people in the story, they all went to heaven, and when they went to heaven they saw, it's just like England, because C.S. Lewis is from England. So he thought that heaven must be just like England. Turn the temperature up a little bit. So that's his anthropomorphism, the idea that God is imagined in the image of man. But if we are to accept Krishna Lila as being divya, then we have to understand that the descriptions in Shastra of Krishna are not some description of someone living in some culture that happened to be present at that time, and people imagine that there's some spiritual world, but rather the spiritual world is manifested on this mundane plane, especially in the dhams, Vrindavan, Navadvip Dham. But at the same time, it is manifested within the plane of the material world. And therefore, especially in Kali Yuga, because things change a lot in Kali Yuga, things change quickly and they deteriorate. So, the principle of anthropological ideas of evolution, they're not totally to be discounted also, because cultures do change, languages do change. But that doesn't mean that, therefore, Vishvamba Mishra, who later became known as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was just some boy who got born and then people told some stories about him and they called him God. It's not like that. Rather, the spiritual world is manifested in the material world. Those who can see, they can see. Navadvip is Vrindavan. Gaur-Gadadha Lila, that is a facsimile in Navadvip of, well, not exact facsimile, but with the Navadvip bhav of Radha Krishna. So there are some deep mysteries here where we say that janma karma cha me divyam, it's all transcendental. How is that manifested on the material plane? There are some apparent influences of the material, but it's not material. Krishna manifests his pastimes within the material world, and they are vidambanam, they are confusing or bewildering if we try to understand from our perspective. And especially if we try to understand from the perspective of Darwinian evolutionary theory and other such. All these theories like prototype Indo-European language and all the Aryan invasion theory, they all come up from this. They can't stand if they have no basis if this, unless we accept the theory of Darwinian evolution. They call it Darwinian evolution, as if Darwin's driving it. He's the force behind it. So what language did Krishna speak? Well, it appears to be what would nowadays be called some form of Prakrit in Vrindavan. And we find in Rupa Goswami's writings, his dramas, they're mostly in Sanskrit, but he sometimes gives lines in Prakrit also, the Vrindavan character. Chaitanya Charitamrita also, there's some parts are written in what are called by commentators Prakrit. That means they may not even know. Prakrit is not one language. Even today in India, so many languages, 570 languages or something like that. So before the days of mass communication, every few kilometers there'd be a different dialect, because there's not so much interaction. People, if you don't speak with people on the other side of the mountain, you may have a completely different language because there's no interaction. So exactly what language Krishna spoke, I guess we'll have to Tyaktva dehang punar janma naiti mameti. We'll have to go back to Godhead to find out exactly what it is. To reconstruct history at such a remote past from our perspective, we don't have the tools to do so. That's why a lot of these theories, they're really just theories, and they're all so many linguistic theories, and they're all disputed. Even the idea that there's this general simplistic idea that speech and writing evolved, but the scholars between themselves haven't got a clue to explain. Apart from giving this simplistic idea, which school children all over the world believe, they can't assemble any evidence of this whatsoever. When did writing begin? Where did it begin? There's the hieroglyphics in Babylonia. I seem to remember from school. Hieroglyphics. Okay. All right. Okay. And then it evolved from that into writing. But it's all very theoretical. All very theoretical. So there are some thoughts. What language does Krishna speak? If we don't know, well, you can still go back to God. You can learn it when you get there. You don't have to learn whatever language it is. You don't have to learn Bengali to be a devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It does help to appreciate the songs of the Vaishnava Acharyas, but it's not essential. There's hope for all you Tamils, even yet. You don't have to go to Vaikuntha. You can go to Golok Vrindavan. So, Hare Krishna. Any question? Don't make them too complicated now. You throw your speculations against my speculations. This is called philosophical, I hope to call it philosophical speculation, not mental speculation. Yeah. What are you talking? Which part of the lecture? Shastra Jukche Shune Pun Dridha Shadha Jaya Jar Uttam Adhikari Sheit Taraye Songsha. The topmost level of devotee is one who, the topmost devotee is one who is expert in Shastra Yukti, which means Yukti can mean disputation. That's how Srila Prabhupada translates it. It can also mean harmonizing. Yukti can mean fighting, getting together to fight, and it can also mean bringing together. It has many meanings. So then, is that absolutely required to be a topmost devotee? Is that the question? Well, where does that leave Radharani? We don't have her fighting with Mayavadis or discussing Vedanta philosophy. Uddhava, he was known as the greatest scholar. He was the disciple of Brihaspati. And he was also known to be the greatest devotee in Dwarka, which among all those Yadavas and huge popular, he was known as being the best devotee. And he was also very highly learned in Shastra. And Krishna said to Vrindavan, so he can see actually what is devotee. Here he is, he's carrying the message with all these philosophical points. He's going to deliver it to these simple cowherd women who Krishna is very kind. I mean, now he's got much more important business. Look, he's in Dwarka and got this big... But after all, he was, in his childhood, there was some cowherd people. He's very kind. He's also remembering them. So Uddhava had to take the message, and he rolls up, big devotee and a big scholar. Not very proud, but he's a devotee, so he's not very proud. But he had that idea, and he came to Vrindavan and found the whole place completely devastated. And the devotees, they're not going to speak philosophy. There's no question of having some Vedantic discussion or any such thing. But he understood that their attachment to Krishna is so much more exalted than his own. He just couldn't imagine even becoming part of it. He thought, in my next life, if I can get born as some grass here, I'll be fortunate enough that devotees can put their feet on my head. So, to be a topmost devotee yes, it's stated there, one who is expert in shastric deliberation, discussion, and who has firm faith. He's the Uttam Adhikari. Shraddhavanjan hoy Bhakti Adhikari, Uttam Madhyam Kanishta Shraddha Anusari. So this is a description of those who are eligible for practicing bhakti. So there's the Kanishta Bhakta, the Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyam Adhikari, Uttam Adhikari. And the Uttam Adhikari is one who's expert. So yes, the devotees of Vrindavan, they come again as Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, and that aspect is exhibited in the world at that time. But there's otherwise in Krishna Lila there's atyutam, or beyond the general level of this is the general level of understanding. But there are other levels also. That's when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was discussing with Rai Ramananda. Then they went through all the discussion of Shastra, and Rai Ramananda came to brought out the conclusion that the loving devotee, he went through first of all come to Shuddha Bhakti, Dasya Rati, Sakya Rati, Madhur Shringar Rati. And this is all Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was appreciating, and then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, go on, tell something more. And Ramananda said that, well, I never found anyone in this world who could even think of there could be anything more. Or what they said after that went on for nights and nights and days and years. But the tattva vichar that is given in detail, the understanding, the shastric understanding, the janma karma chameta vyame vangyo vetita, that's given in detail. After that, there are just little insights into that given. So this is the general understanding, and beyond that there is that which is not ordinarily to be discussed. Therefore, we find that's described about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Jadi Gorna Hoito Tobeki Hoito Kemane Dharitam De Radhar Mahima Prema Rasha Shima Jagate Janato Ke. This song, Basu Ghosh, a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sings that if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had not been, if he had not existed or been, or in Hindi you would say Jadi Gorna Hoito Yadi Gaur Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Nahi Hota. So it means something like if he had not existed. Jadi Gorna Hoito Tabiki, what would have happened? How could we have, literally means how could we have held our bodies? How could we have continued to live? Radhar Mahima, the glories of Srimati Radha. Prema Rasa Shima, which is the limit of Prema Ras. Jagate Janatoke, who else but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could have informed the world of that? Then Madhura Brinda Bipina Madhuri Prabesha Chaturisha. Prabesha Chaturisha. Madhura Brinda Bipina Madhuri Prabesha Chaturisha. Baraja Jubati Bhavera Bhakati Shakati Hoitoka. So he goes on to say that Madhura Vrinda, the beautiful Vrindavan, Madhura Vrinda, the beautiful groves of Vrindavan, Madhura Vrinda Bipina Madhuri, Madhura Vrinda Bipina Madhuri. Who can enter there? The bhava bhakti, the feelingful bhakti of the young girls of Vrindavan, Shakati Hoitoka, who can give that? Who has the power to give that? Or to enter into it? Or Prabesha Chaturisha, that's the essence of the essence, the topmost, everything. So, yeah, in regular understanding, then this is the topmost devotee. Jnani tvat maiva me matam. There's all the udara sarva evaite jnani tvat maiva me matam. Krishna says that of all the different kinds of devotees, one who is in knowledge, he is the best. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach of a platform even beyond knowledge. It doesn't mean ignorance, but it means that knowledge of the Lord's opulence is covered by a deep sense of mamata, of thinking Krishna is mine. So that's one consideration. And the Uttam Bhaktas, they come with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they teach, they analyze all these different points, and they teach all these things. Unless one's expert in all the intricacies of Shastra, he has to take birth again. Who's expert in all the intricacies of Shastra? Krishna? All the intricacies? The very idea of thinking that I can understand it all means you don't understand anything. That's stated right there in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Anyone who thinks I understand Srimad Bhagavatam, they don't understand it. So anyone who thinks, yes, I have mastered Shastra, now I'm eligible to go back to Godhead, get back to the kindergarten. Bhakti begins with thinking that I don't know anything, and it continues. Jananta eva janantu kimba hukjana me prabho manasa vachasa vapyo. What is that? Manasa vachaso vaibhavam tava gochara. Brahma, who thought he knew a lot, and he does know a lot. He's got 4 heads and they all work better than any of ours. On seeing Krishna's opulence, and that's only his opulence, and not to speak of his prem bhav. Of course, they're not entirely separate, but on seeing a manifestation of Krishna's opulence, he said that, well, someone can say, I know Krishna, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't know anything about him. I know Krishna's glories. So this idea, you have to understand all the intricacies of Shastra. It's not possible. Shastra means all knowledge. The only person who is sarvagya, who knows everything, is Krishna himself. So it's really a foolish idea, and it sounds like a self-promoting idea to say that you have to know. I can imagine who said this, someone who thinks he knows all the intricacies of Shastra. Some particular person who's such a fool, he thinks he knows all the intricacies of Shastra. But he didn't even understand the very beginning. That humility is amanitvam, adambhitvam, the beginning, the first 2 principles of knowledge are amanitvam, adambhitvam, which are similar terms, which means not being proud. And then the symptom of knowledge should be vidyadadati vinayam. Knowledge, the result of knowledge is one should become humble. And there's a different kind of humility to the person who's low on the social scale, and it's pragmatic for him to be humble. He can survive better like that. Which is why we sometimes find very humble devotee and they get given a position and something goes wrong with their humility. It was self-serving obsequiousness, that's called, where you show yourself to be humble because you find it the best way to live in the world. But real humility can be seen in the behavior of someone who I read this somewhere, some Kami said this, he had some insight that a person's character can be seen in how they treat people from whom they've got nothing to gain or lose. I don't think he said that. But if you've got, just like someone who's completely insignificant in relationship, a rich man, and there's someone on the street who gets in his way or something of his kind. Yeah, get out of here. He may be very rough with him, thinking, what is this useless person? But a learned person is, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that, what is that? Udbegna deba. Prani matra. Udbegna deba. That not to give any anxiety to any living being. So self-promotion is the most foolish thing. Anyone who wants to promote themselves, even people who are, many people who are meat eaters, and they don't have any Vedic culture, let's put it like that. But they also don't like people who are arrogant and self-promoting, and they appreciate someone who's polite and actually, to give an example from my past in this lifetime, in that, just like in India, most young men, or many of them, are fascinated by cricket. Well, from the part of the world where I come from, it's soccer, football. So you get some soccer players, most of them actually, who are quite the good ones. They're very arrogant, and a lot of them are very aggressive. But actually, the people appreciate if someone's a great footballer, which they appreciate. But if he's actually very polite and doesn't say, "Yeah, I'm great," they actually appreciate that very much. This even among beef eaters. Football, it's just a stupid game. But even in that, if someone's actually polite, and he doesn't take all the credit for himself and says, actually, it's a very good team and a very good manager, and it's not just they appreciate that. So what to speak? You're supposed to be a transcendentalist. And you really need a guru who's come from the spiritual world. Not talking about anyone in particular, but I was speaking to Krsna the other day, and he told me that you have to have a guru who speaks face to face with Krsna. Only such a person is eligible to be a guru. And and I was talking to Krsna the other day, and Krsna told me this, and there was someone who was initiated by Prabhupada, and one of the things, he was born in Vrindavan in a Brahmin family, and he used to follow Kartik Vrata very strictly. So he wrote in his book, only a person who's a Brahmin born in Vrindavan and who follows Kartik Vrata strictly is qualified to be a guru. Wonder who's talking about that. And there are other things you can do. You could also be a great scholar of Bhagavatam. If he was a great scholar of Bhagavatam, he might write that only if you're a great scholar of Bhagavatam are you qualified to be a guru. The Devananda Pandit, I was just hearing on. He was a great scholar of Bhagavatam in Navadvip at the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he had no interest in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even though he's a great scholar of Bhagavatam. So ultimately, what is it? The bhakti means that there are many definitions, but just one's whole being is completely absorbed in Krishna with the intention to serve Krishna. It's not that you think, I have to serve Krishna. It's not a logical thought, but it's just one's whole being. That one just lives just like a fish moves in the water. He doesn't make some logical thought that, well, now I have to move forward and take in some water and pass it out again. And just a fish is a fish, and that's what he does. So as a pure devotee, they don't think, oh, I have to serve Krishna. But it's just as natural as breathing for them. So and they don't think I'm the greatest. Uttam hoya, what is that? Uttam hoya apan ake mane trinadham. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, one even though one who's on the topmost platform thinks that he's lower than grass. So, easy to talk about. Easy to talk about, but difficult to be. But at least we can talk about it, and then we can start to think about it, and maybe someday we'll actually become humbler than a blade of grass. But if we don't talk about it and we think that the aim is to show oneself to be greater than everyone else, then there's no question of making any advancement. You can study Srimad Bhagavatam life after life and become a great scholar, and you can have the whole world say you're a great devotee, but Krishna won't be pleased. So, what language does Krishna speak? What language does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speak? It appears that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his pastimes 500 years ago in this world, generally spoke a Bengali that was influenced by the prevailing culture at that time. In Puri, what did he speak? Well, many of his associates were from Bengal, but many of them were local also. So, who knows? It may be like the many Bengali people who are presently living in Orissa who have been settled there for generations. At home they still speak Bengali, and among themselves they still speak Bengali, but outside they speak Oriya, which are quite similar languages, Bengali and Oriya. But then if we say that in the spiritual world Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks Bengali, we can presume that Bengali is without the Urdu and other influences that appear in Chaitanya Charitamrita. They're not very major influences, just occasionally there are a few words in Chaitanya Charitamrita which are clearly Urdu. So what does Krishna speak? Well, in the spiritual world it must be that colloquial language, but it won't be exactly the Prakrit of the Indian subcontinent at the present time. Even I'm saying that outside of Braj, Krishna speaks Sanskrit. He wouldn't speak Sanskrit with everyone. Krishna knows all languages. When he entered Mathura, he spoke with people like the washerman and the florist, and they would have been speaking some Prakrit language also, some colloquial language. Presumably they wouldn't speak in Sanskrit. So we should all be born in Krishna's pastimes, and then we won't even think of questions like this. We'll just speak whatever language everyone around us is speaking, and speak with Krishna. And as Krishna said Srila Prabhupada said to one of his disciples, a young girl, teenage girl, that Krishna will kiss you. So Krishna speaks the language of love. Hare Krishna. Finished for now. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Sri Sri Gauranitai. Bhagavad-gita as it is. Ki Jai.